when colossal ice sheets crawled down from the north like drifting continents, crushing ancient forests, forcing rivers to change course, and compelling every living thing to learn how to endure. Winter stretched on. The warm season was brief and fragile. The world never stood still long enough for anyone to feel safe. In that age, amid ice and fog, Boa Gelida Magnus still endured. When Boa Gelida Magnus revealed itself, there was no moment of surprise, only the delayed realization that what lay before one's eyes was not landscape. Its body was immense in a way that defeated the human eye's ability to measure. Not long in the sleek manner of modern snakes, but thick, heavy, and saturated with mass. The midsection bulged like the hull of an armored vehicle, rings of muscle stacked into solid blocks, devoid of gentle curves, only compressed force. If a human stood beside it, their shoulder would barely reach halfway up the resting coil of its body, and that was when the serpent had not yet moved. Its skin did not gleam, not smooth. It was coarse, thick, dark like stone scoured by ice and mud, submerged, mottled patterns, earth brown, cold gray, moss green allowed the colossal body to dissolve into the frozen forest. From a distance of several dozen paces, Boa Gelida Magnus ceased to be a creature. It became a strip of dark ground, a heavy shadow lying where it should not be. Its head was broad and flat, roughly the size of an industrial freezer laid on its side. There was nothing sharp or agile about it. The lower jaw was thick, heavy, hanging low, as though its own weight were a weapon. When the head lifted, the motion was slow but absolute, like a concrete slab hoisted by a crane. Once it rose from the ground, nothing within reach had time to escape. The eyes were small, black, set deep within massive sockets. They showed no emotion, no curiosity, no anger. Boa Gelida Magnus did not look at the world like a nimble predator. It mapped the world. Any creature heavy enough to be prey appeared to it as a signal vibration, pressure, rhythmic movement, clear as machinery echoing through a silent night. The ferocity of this serpent did not lie in frenzy or sudden aggression. It did not strike from stimulation. It did not display. The ferocity of Boa Gelida Magnus was absolute indifference to the fate of whatever entered its reach. When it hunted, there was no chaotic chase, no roar, only a moment in which space itself was occupied, as though the ground had risen. The first coil closed with the weight of a steel bunker door. The second, the third followed, each a unit of pressure, crushing the prey's ribcage bit by bit. Death arrived not through open wounds, but through the collapse of vital function. Even when resisted horns driven into its flesh, hooves pounding Boa Gelida Magnus did not accelerate. It did not need to. Its thick hide endured shallow tears. Its massive body absorbed impact like industrial shielding. Each struggle from the prey merely caused the coils to adjust, tighter, more precise. To other creatures of the Ice Age, saber-toothed cats, scavengers, even humans, Boa Gelida Magnus was not an opponent to be challenged. It was a moving danger zone, a passive catastrophe. One did not defeat it, one avoided it, as one avoids thin ice or a fracture in a glacier. In a world of ice, where power was often measured in speed, fangs, or claws, Boa Gelida Magnus represented another kind of ferocity. The ferocity of mass, of patience, and of a creature that knew, given enough time, everything would eventually step into its reach. It did not live on open ice fields, where cutting winds flayed the skin and the ground lay dead and rigid. It chose the margins of the Ice Age, low forests, threaded with marshes, valleys along melting glaciers, strips of land where ice advanced at night and withdrew when the weak sun appeared. There, the cold was strong enough to kill many species, but not strong enough to erase all life. It was in these half-frozen, half-living places that the giant serpent held on. The massive body of Boa Gelida Magnus lay pressed to the ground, stretched across cold mud, exposed roots, and frost-coated stone. When it lay still, it resembled a dark strip of land, newly shoved up by ice. rough, and heavy. The forest did not grow over it. The forest avoided it. The paths of large beasts curved gently away, as though the terrain itself understood that there were spaces not meant to be entered. This was the age of elk, giant ground sloths, ancient bison, and saber-toothed cats, great creatures born to endure the cold. But Boa Gelida Magnus was different. It had no thick fur, no speed, no herd. It lived by mass, by heat retention, and by patience that stretched across many cycles of glacial advance and retreat. When the ice rose, many species withdrew or slowly vanished. Boa Gelida Magnus did not migrate in packs. It gradually contracted its world, clinging to waters not yet fully frozen, to lowlands that still held warmth. There, it lay motionless for days, even weeks, letting the cold slide over it like a familiar trial. The elk appeared first as a massive sound. Heavy hooves struck the wet ground, producing a steady, deep vibration that traveled far through mud and roots. Each step was like a wooden mallet pounding the floor of a warehouse. To the forest, it was life in motion. To Boa Gelida Magnus, it was an invitation. The bull emerged from the morning mist, towering, its shoulders humped like the hood of an off-road truck. Its massive antlers spread wide, tangled with tines, each long enough to pierce the body of another beast. Its breath burst out in short, urgent plumes of white. The cold season had lasted too long. It was hungry, and the ancient riverside meadow was one of the few places where food remained. It did not see Boa Gelida Magnus. The serpent lay along the muddy bank, its colossal body stretched out like a dark embankment, so motionless that even the light seemed to forget to pass over it. Its skin blended with mud, with roots, with the shadows cast by rotting trunks. Had there been modern thermal cameras, one would have seen only a blurred mass of warmth, no edges, no clear shape like an engine recently shut down, still holding its heat. The elk took a few more steps. Each step sent a faint tremor through the ground, transmitted straight into the serpent's body, through its belly. Boa Gelida Magnus did not coil back. It was already in the right position. This entire hunt was not a chase, but a problem solved in advance. When the distance closed to only a few meters, the world folded shut. There was no sudden lunge like those in modern footage. The movement of Boa Gelida Magnus was like a hydraulic crane being activated. The nearest section of its body lifted, slid through the mud in absolute silence, and then dropped onto the elk's flank with its full weight. The impact did not explode with sound. There was only the air being forced from the prey's lungs in a short, hoarse exhalation. The elk thrashed, antlers swept sideways, driving into the serpent's skin, leaving shallow tears. But that was the reflex of a creature accustomed to facing warm-blooded predators, not a mass of muscle weighing hundreds of kilograms that continued to collapse downward. The second coil closed around its chest, then the third, like self-tightening steel bands of an industrial machine. With every attempt to inhale, Boa Gelida Magnus tightened by another increment. Not fast, not slow, precise. The ribcage began to deform, like a car body crushed in a scrapyard, not shattering, but bending, warping, becoming irrecoverable. Blood still flowed. Oxygen no longer had a path in. The sounds of struggle thinned. The vibrations in the ground weakened, then stopped. The serpent maintained its coils for a long while after the prey had died. This was not cruelty, it was certainty. In this world, releasing too early meant losing a meal that might have to last an entire season. When it finally loosened, the elk's body collapsed into the mud with a deep, heavy sound. White breath slowly dissipated into the cold air. Boa Gelida Magnus began the process of swallowing unhurried, unmistakable. Its jaws spread in a way that modern humans might liken to a subway tunnel door opening beneath the earth. Not beautiful, not fast, but absolutely effective. The hunt ended before the forest had time to realize it had begun. To Boa Gelida Magnus, this was not a victory. This was fuel, a mass of flesh and energy sufficient to sustain it through many weeks of cold, lying still like part of the terrain, while the outside world continued to thin and fade. And in the place where the riverside meadow had just lost a giant creature, the forest learned another old lesson. There are predators that do not need to pursue, only to remain in the right place long enough.